Hi, welcome to Uncommon Visionaries Go-to-Market Sessions, a series where we explore the latest trends and challenges facing go-to-market leaders and how to take them on. I'm Linda Lian, the co-founder and CEO of Common Room, the leading community growth platform. And today, I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined by mentor, advisor, friend, Douglas Hanna, two-time CEO and currently Chief Operating Officer at Grafana Labs. Doug, it's such a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, thanks, Linda. Appreciate you thinking of me and having me on.
Doug, can you start off with an introduction of yourself and what Grafana Labs does for our audience?
Sure. So, like you said, I'm Doug. I live in New York City. I joined Grafana about 3.5 years ago, pre-Series A, after working at Zendesk for about 4 years and being an entrepreneur twice. So, it's been really exciting to be with Grafana as we've grown. Stepping back, Grafana, open source observability software. So we help companies and organizations ranging from individual kind of hobbyists to the biggest companies in the world understand if their systems are working, if they're online or offline or slow or fast. It really helps them be able to be responsive to their own customers or whatever they're trying to get information and visibility into. That's how I would describe it, kind of a layman's term. Happy to go into more detail. And then from a company perspective, we're fully remote. We were pre-COVID and customers and employees all over the world.
You guys were pretty ahead of the trend on that one.
I went into an office every day in my job before Grafana, so it was a little bit of a change for me to work from home full time. But I was glad that I worked at Grafana about 6 months before COVID really got started. So I had my home office set up and I was kind of ready to go when everybody was scrambling to get their desks and their chairs and all that other stuff.
That's called good timing. Well, Grafana is famous for having an incredible open source community, and open source and open core companies like Grafana Labs have played such a key role in kind of the origin and popularization of B2B developer communities. So what does community mean to you? How do you define community? And what does it mean to your business?
Totally. So community, I think, is really essential to Grafana. It really, like we started as we differentiate a project and a product, and we started as an open source project well before really a company even existed. One of our founders basically did it over the holidays in his free time trying to solve a problem that he had. And our community was really kind of what has not only like developed the software itself. In a lot of cases, obviously, we have people that work for us now that are part of that community and develop the software. But in the early days, it was really like, in particular, a bunch of different people from the community kind of working together to build something they were interested in. And we still have kind of versions of that today. And we leverage our community to do everything from obviously build new features to test new releases, to help with documentation, to provide feedback on where we should go in the future. So I think it's very collaborative for us, and we're constantly thinking about how can we help the community, how can we add value to the community, primarily through the software that we provide at no cost, but also through our events and other programming and things like that we can do.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So it sounds like the community has been a key driver in innovation around the product and the use cases. Now, you mentioned that Grafana was a open source project for a long time before it was ever a business. How many years was it kind of more so an open source project than a commercial business?
You're testing my Grafana history trivia here, but I want to say it was probably about 3+ years before the company really figured out a way to get repeatable revenue. And like people at some point were basically just donating to the company. And that was like where the first dollars came in. They're like, hey, we really want this. And then I think a lot of open source companies go through this shift and evolution where the power users that and the community clearly drives adoption, which for us is really like the start of our go-to-market journey. They're like, hey, we're really using this. We want it to be successful. Can we give you money effectively to help you support it and be a sustainable company and organization? And that was what the early days of the go-to-market looked like. Now it's much more repeatable. We have differentiated features. We have hosted we have managed versions, all these other things that provide value beyond just hey, we feel bad for you guys and we want to give you money. Uh, and we have a real business now. But in the early days, they were just like, hey, let's provide value and see what happens. And honestly, a big part of our journey today for our new projects that eventually turn into products is let's release something that we think the community will find valuable. And then maybe 1, 2, 3 years down the road, we'll monetize it.
Yeah, I love that. Having your community as kind of that core piece of your innovation cycle before you kind of go into, what you could call more of a commercialization cycle. Um, well, you talk about how community and these individual developers and adopters are sort of the drivers of product activation. So what we see is what happens after product activation? How do you kind of think about that customer journey between a single developer using the open source project and then, they go to their job at Nike the next day and they're really espousing Nike to become an enterprise customer of Grafana's commercial product. And what we see is, there's kind of this, I guess, what we see with open source and open core companies is that oftentimes the bulk of their revenue will come from a small sliver of their usage base. And I think there's this misconception out there that users who come kind of inbound or through the community or who are trying out the open source or the free offering without talking to sales are more likely to be long tail users. But what we see more and more in our work with leading open source and PLG companies and in our own experience is that this really isn't the case anymore. So as purchasing power flows down to kind of the end user, the individual developers, and all of that, solution discovery and adoption is starting to happen more and more in these new digital channels where community loves to engage. Are you also seeing kind of large enterprises coming through kind of this community-led adoption motion? And how do you think about what you're seeing with your business and then thinking about allocating that attention between a product led motion and then a sales led or human led motion?
Okay. There's
Yeah,
a lot of, I
lots to
think,
unpack there.
interesting, exciting things to unpack there. So maybe it's just starting at maybe the top of the funnel. We have about 1 million active instances of Grafana, a little over that, and almost 10 million kind of users of Grafana. And a lot of those users are hobbyists. So they might literally be monitoring like the solar panels on their house or their homebrew setup or something like that. But to your point, those people, chances are they have jobs at companies that could be a good fit for enterprise products. So we see that. And that's definitely kind of like a source of new kind of paying customers for us for sure. And it's a source of kind of evangelists embedded across so many different companies or embedded into so many different companies. We also see, I think from a commercial products perspective, it's more traditional path of someone adopts Grafana at the company of their choosing, pick one, and then they're using it open source. Maybe it spreads throughout the company, different groups and teams are using it. And then that prompts them to kind of reach out to about a commercial interest, or we find that they're using it and we reach out to them. Like we think about our go-to-market kind of journey at adopt is our critical first step. And then you do land, expand, and extend. And that adopt piece, almost all of our customers, not all of them, but pretty much all of them, start as an open source user, kind of broadly as a community member before they become a paying customer. And like if you think about PLG, like a term that I feel is not super popular when I joined Grafana was now super popular. If you think about our PLG as our open source kind of projects and all of our open source community, we're absolutely PLG driven in terms of where our sales comes from. It's not quite as direct as like a Slack or a Zendesk or like a fully SaaS offering because we have a lot less data on who our open source users are. We don't put a lot of tracking or kind of phone home in our open source software. Like that's not what our community wants. So we respect that. But we also try to do a lot of things that encourage our community to reach out to us in terms of that content I was talking about. We have lots of webinars and workshops and things like that. Other content that really engages them. And then over time, we get to know them better and then we can engage with them in a commercial way. But I think the key response to your question is pretty much everybody that we eventually do business with, which is definitely a small percentage of our overall community. Like we don't have 1 million customers or 500,000 customers, starts as an open source user. and then they kind of progress from there. And we're totally okay with the vast majority of our users never paying us anything, never becoming a paying customer. But I think we're really unique in that if you think about Fortune 500 companies, probably the vast majority of them have one or more, in some cases dozens or hundreds of instances of Grafana that are actively being used with them. And no kind of proprietary software company, probably maybe besides Microsoft or something like that, or Google, has that kind of reach. So that we try to leverage that heavily, and it's been really successful for us.
Yeah, that's incredible. How do you think about data connectedness when it comes to go-to-market operations? Right? You're parsing through, millions of data points around product adoption and open source usage and all of these individuals and hobbyists who may or may not work at enterprise customers. How do you kind of architect that internally to really give your go-to-market teams clarity?
So it's definitely a challenge. I think we are data rich, but maybe use case still fumbling a little bit in terms of how we use all the data that we have, and do so in a way that's kind of targeted and actionable. Our general philosophy has been create a lot of things that encourage people to give us some of their data, like really name, company, email address. We're not asking for anything too crazy. And then we're trying to base our signals and who we target and how we think about going to market based on where we're seeing the most interest there. But it's still a challenge of ours. It's not something we've perfected, and talking to kind of peers at other open source companies, it's a common one, and it's definitely something that we're leveraging a bunch of tools, including Common Room, to help us understand more and action on more directly.
Yeah, absolutely. As the explosion of kind of digital end user data happens across product usage and who are they as a customer to your organization and who are they as a community member, I think all of that, companies are really starting to say, "Hey, how can we really make use of this in a data-driven way?" And, I think a lot of go-to-market tooling in the past haven't been as data-driven or data-informed as, we now have an opportunity to do. Well, as you've noted, community is so key to Grafana Labs' success as a business, and not to say as a series of open source projects. And in many ways, specifically kind of serving, if you were to map kind of the new sort of community-led growth motion to a traditional sales and marketing journey, it's kind of serving the top of your funnel, right? And I think a lot of times today, people can be hesitant to draw this kind of distinct line between the success of your community and the success of your business. And it's this critical flywheel that powers all open source and PLG organizations, but you don't want your community to feel like a means to an end. You talk so much so far in terms of how you guys think about offering value to the community before you're ever thinking about, kind of advancing them along the customer journey to a paying customer. So how would you recommend, business leaders out there, revenue leaders, get comfortable and get candid about kind of that mutual value that comes from investing in community and the benefits of being able to connect community to revenue?
Sure. So we think about kind of value creation and value capture. And the value creation side for us is, I think it's primarily through we release really high quality software that you can download and use or run on our cloud for free. And like that's a lot of value creation. Like that's the software that people do and definitely will pay for. And we continue to add new stuff to open source, and we have an annual kind of large release of Grafana itself, and we do basically releases every 4 to 6 weeks of other kind of continuous improvements to it. So that's a lot of value creation. I think if you're doing that, I think your community gives you a lot more trust and leeway, and you have a lot more credibility with them. But we're also really focused on the things around it. Like we host our events and meetups, and we host a bunch of workshops and webinars. Like one of our most popular ones is like extreme dashboard makeovers, or a community member can sign up and work with people on our team to like really kind of optimize some of their dashboards and build new dashboards. And like we try to do a lot of that stuff. And sure, like we get more information about community members through it. We maybe understand that that's going to translate to a commercial use case or something like that. But we try to do it from really the view of like, if we provide value, that's going to help eventually translate into our business. And ideally comes off as, because I think authentically it is, it's less transactional. We really think about it's a long-term relationship with these community members. Our brand and kind of the perception amongst the community is super important to us, and we take it really seriously because of what you mentioned. Like, we think of our first part of our go-to-market journey, adopt, is very intentional, and our kind of number one metric is grow adoption of our open source projects, because if we do that, kind of the rest of the funnel will come through, and we'll see the business kind of benefit as a result.
That's an incredibly powerful North Star metric, and one that, is very much sort of incentivized and aligned with everything that your community cares about and wants, right? It's all about the product, and it's all about their ability to, build their new use cases and build their career on Grafana. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about some broader go-to-market industry trends. So we talked to CROs and COOs, and it seems like go-to-market today is harder than ever before. You know, products are more competitive, email open rates are down, SEO doesn't convert as well, cookie tracing might be going away, privacy concerns are on the rise. Gartner has this interesting stat that sellers today only have 5% of their customers' attention during their journey, which is, when you think about traditional sales, a really small slice of your ability to really affect the purchase decision. And it sounds like when you talk about, when someone raises their hand and wants to talk to sales, a lot of times they've already adopted the product. They already know that they want to use Grafana. A lot of that decision has been made. What have you seen with respect to some of these trends, and what should modern revenue leaders really be thinking about?
So I think we've been isolated from that a little bit because of this adoption journey that I described. Like, our marketing leader actually refers to, instead of demand generation, he calls it demand curation, with the idea that we have so much demand across, like, an interest in our projects and products increasingly, that it's really about how do we get the right kind of people talking to the right people, and understand where in kind of their life cycle and journey with us can we provide value. And if we really encourage our reps that are talking to customers and prospects, like, hey, be curious, ask them about Grafana. And I talk to lots of people on our selling and customer teams, and I've never been at a company where the users are so happy to talk to me about what they're doing with Grafana. So I think we've done that through kind of this big investment in our community, in our open source project, by, we call it Big Tent philosophy, where we try to really focus on interoperability, which we think is a very kind of community choice, user choice kind of operating kind of philosophy, where even if it's kind of lock-in is good for vendors, but bad for users and customers, and Big Tent really thinks about that as the opposite, where if you want to use our products, you can. And if you don't want to use our products, but integrate some other products, we allow that as well. And that we're seeing that continue to resonate, kind of regardless of the economic climate, and regardless of some of the other things you mentioned around it basically being hard to market at companies and then users in an old school way. We really think of it as let's think about it more long-term and sustainable.
I love that. So tactically, a lot of companies out there who have business models similar to Grafana, right? They may be open source, open core. The revenue leaders there may kind of have this philosophical divide between, cultivating the community and then needing to hit their numbers. What are some of the specific ways in which you guys talk about or train your sales reps and your marketing folks to be so community oriented and to be part of this Big Tent philosophy? What are some of the things that they do differently when they engage with the community members that creates this incredible brand affinity and this sort of community love?
So it's definitely hard like that. I don't think the trade-off is quite as binary as that, but there's certainly a version like that balance between value creation and value capture. And I don't think we have a scientific way of knowing where the pendulum should swing for any given decision or project or product. So it is challenging. A line I use with our selling team is winning at open source is not is not a given. Like there's competition amongst open source software as well. And if we think about open source as really the beginning of our go-to-market journey, we need people to use our open source projects first, and then they'll eventually become customers. And then we do a lot of coaching and trying to share success stories of, hey, this person in this cycle maybe generated a 6-figure or 7-figure deal at the end, but they really started by just getting to know their use cases and engaging with them, and engaging with individual engineers and SREs and people like that, and helping them solve their problems. And it requires that long-term focus. It's less transactional, I think, than like trying to sell someone a typical SaaS tool. But we found it really benefits us, and our motion is definitely different. And we talk about that a lot, both in our interview process and onboarding and ongoing basis. But if you kind of learn to harness the power of the community and the breadth of it as well, as a seller here, you can be really successful. And we see that time and time again.
Yeah, I think it ties back to this theme that you've been talking about this whole time, which is really how do you provide value on the first touch and how do you drive that kind of authenticity around that? And I think with sales, like what we're seeing is that it starts with being context aware, right? To your point, it's not this transactional engagement anymore. They really have to go in there and understand the problems that the users are solving for, and really provide value through understanding context. So lots of incredible sort of trends that Doug is talking about with, modern B2B SaaS and go-to-market. So it's an exciting time to be in technology, but I think today everyone can say that we're also in somewhat of a tough environment. What guidance would you give to go-to-market leaders who are looking ahead to 2023 and maybe don't have as much visibility or predictability as they did in previous years?
So what I've talked to our teams about, and what we talk about kind of as a leadership team at Grafana, is a couple of things. One, we really want to focus on what we can control. And none of us know how to predict the macro economy, or we would be running hedge funds and not observability software companies. So we focus on what we can do. And particularly in a go-to-market team and supporting our customers, like our customers are asking us about, hey, how do I think about the value of this purchase I'm going to make? And can you help me understand that? So we've been investing a lot of time and energy in helping our customers with that. And how do I think about, as I continue to scale, or I think about addressing costs and things like that, how will Grafana help me with that? And we're really, I think, refining kind of our talk tracks around that and making sure that customers are comfortable with the growth model. And then as a business, we're watching this for the signals we have. Like we think people are going to continue to invest in observability, continue to invest in open source software, but we're watching the signals that we have and doing what we can to kind of be responsive to that as well.
Love it. Think about what you can control, dial those in, and focus on doing that. Really think about the value that you're providing to customers, and then becoming sort of that cost saver in a time when everyone's trying to do more with less. And I think those are incredible tips that I really relate to as well, even though we're much earlier than Grafana as a startup. Well, Doug, thank you so much for joining us. It's been lovely to have you.
Yeah, thank you again for having me. It was good to catch up and talk about these topics.
To hear future conversations with great go-to-market leaders like Doug, follow Common Room on LinkedIn and Twitter. To learn more about what we're building, visit commonroom.io.